Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on the Disciple Makers podcast. As you guys know, we're in the middle of a series right now, really highlighting the partners that we have at Discipleship.org. We have incredible partners from all different walks of life that are really focused and passionate about disciple making. And the organization we're going to be highlighting today, guys, the organization, the founder of the organization radically changed my life. I'll tell you that story in a little bit. But we have Vicki Gatchell. Is that right? Did I say your name right, Vicki?
Yep, rhymes with satchel. That's what I always tell people.
So, Vicki, it's great to have you on representing the Navigators, which I know many of our listeners have heard of you guys, have been impacted by the incredible work that you have. But why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and just tell us a little bit about the organization and then your heart personally?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm super proud of who I work for. I am Vicki Gatchell. I work for the Navigators. Specifically, my ministry is Navigators Church Ministries. And I'm in the greater Fort Wayne, Indiana area. So don't concentrate completely there. I'm part of the lead team for Navigators Church Ministries. So I have some oversight along with a team of 4 of us. Nationwide. So I get to look over recruiting, shepherding, and some things like that we're about as a mission. But primarily the churches that I'm working with are around the greater Fort Wayne area. I've got one that we go down to see in Cincinnati, and we're coaching and working with them there. I've had some influence in Canada and some churches up there as well. So because of working for an older well-known organization, some opportunities come along sometimes to go other places and speak into other places. And to be honest, I never even dreamed of what God has given me today. Yeah. The Navigators have been around since 1933 when Dawson Trotman started discipling sailors, and he's got a wonderful testimony about that. And Josh, you were telling me just a few minutes ago before we hit record of kind of how that impacted you. I don't know if I should tell or you should tell, but it'd be good. It would be fun to share just a snippet of Dawson Trotman's story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was in India. So I've lived in India the last 16 and a half years and just recently moved back to the States with my family. But I was in India and I had a mentor of mine who was an old navigator, actually. And basically I was praying through how do we really fulfill the Great Commission in a place like India that's so massive and huge. And he sent me an audio recording of Dawson Trotman preaching at, it was actually a Navigators gathering on one of his really keynote speeches he gave all over the world called Born to Reproduce. Yeah. And man, that sermon radically shifted the direction of my life. It really did. I was so convicted. I paused it multiple times throughout the audio in order to pray and really think through what the Lord was calling me into in that next season. And so basically, if you guys are out there listening, if you've never heard his message, please look it up. It was at the time, the one that I listened to, Vicki, it was preached sometime in the 1950s. Yeah. It was just an audio recording of it. But I know that they also have the transcript in a book now and all sorts of. So if you'd rather read the sermon, you could do that. If you want to listen to it, you could do that. But basically just challenged me in my own personal life. Am I a disciple that is actually reproducing more disciples? Am I fulfilling the call that God has on my life? And if not, why? And he actually gives in the message 3 main reasons why we're not reproducing. And all of them are massively convicting. And so anyway, it really challenged me, Vicki, and put me on a pathway to really be a disciple who makes disciples. And it radically changed our ministry in India. And so I jokingly say, Dawson was my gateway drug into multiplication. He really set me on a different pathway. And so anyway, that's kind of the little snippet you're talking about there, Vicki, of how the Navigators kind of changed my life for sure.
Yeah. And I would have a similar testimony to that too. I had come to Christ through Youth for Christ back in my high school days, and everybody said, you got to find the Navigators when you go away to school. And I went to Ohio State, and I got in touch with the Navigators. And I like to say, like, the foundation that was built within me during those years has really been what the rest of my spiritual life has rested on. for all of this time. So when I was there, I learned how to make disciples. I learned how to share my faith. I learned how to study the scriptures. I learned how to pray, many different ways how to pray. And I was personally discipled for the first time. And I saw how it was helping me to grow and become confident in the gospel, become confident, and not only that, but motivated to share that with other people. And that foundation has stayed with me for the rest of my life. My husband and I met in the Navigators at Ohio State, so that's been a mindset for us all these years. We've served in the church in many ways. We love the local church. We've taught. He's been an elder. I've led many Bible studies. But also along with that, I've always been a disciple maker, just gathering people to myself to help them personally walk with Jesus. And that's what I find. Not only was that life-changing for me, but it's life-changing for other people as well.
That's so good, Vicki. And your testimony, Vicki, I've heard that's a very similar testimony time and time again when I come across navigators across the world. And so, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I had a mentor. He's still a mentor of mine. He's in his 80s, but was in the Navigators, I think, for 20 or 30 years. And the foundation that was built in his life have carried him faithfully he's now been in ministry for well over 50 years and has been a Christian for more than that. Yeah. And those foundational elements that the Navigators built in his life, he's still using those tools. He's still memorizing scripture. He's still at 80 years old. And it's honestly, I don't know of too many ministries out there, Vicki, that have been around so long that are building such a solid foundation that men and women are building upon for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? And so, and I think that's so important because so many organizations or ministries out there, they may have some great tools or some great pathways, but the foundation that they're building on sometimes isn't as strong. And that's what I found with navigators. Any navigator I've met, man, the foundation they are on is so solid and so strong and so biblical. It's beautiful. Would you mind unpacking, Vicki, for us? If there are people out there listening right now and they do feel like maybe they're on not as strong as a foundation disciple making wise as they'd hope to be, even as disciples themselves or how they make disciples. What are some of those strong things that you guys put in from the beginning in the Navigators pathway that really help kind of build that foundation in people's lives?
Yeah, I can think of a couple ways to come at that question. One is just some of the tools that we have. We have some tools that frankly were created by Dawson Trotman and his friends back in the 50s, but they've been so solid that people have used them now for decades. One of them is our discipleship wheel. So the idea of Christ is the center, he's the hub, and everything revolves around him. But we have vertical spokes, so prayer and worship relating to God, and horizontal spokes. Back in the day, we used to call it fellowship. Now we talk about community a lot, but it's having people around us. Like, this is not a solo journey. And then also witnessing or sharing our faith and getting the gospel out there, being able to explain the gospel to people. Those are very solid things that we sit on as navigators. The foundation of the Word of God is always there. When we sit with someone and disciple them, it's over the scriptures. We want to dig in together, see what it says, and then how does that relate to our lives? I think another thing that's so special about the Navigators approach is that it's life to life. It might be one-on-one or one-on-two or one-on-three, but we keep it very small, micro groups. And the reason for that is we can really talk about what's really going on in our lives. How does the scripture really inform what I'm doing? How can I learn from God? And it's too hard to do that in a larger group. The vulnerability isn't there. The personability, if that's a word, isn't there. We believe in the preaching of the word, and we believe in small group Bible studies. They all have their place. But it's really in that small community where people talk about their transformation.
Yeah, that's so good, Vicki. And that the wheel that you just talked about a moment ago, what I love about that is so often I think when we talk, even unintentionally, we almost say that Jesus is the first among many priorities, or and many times maybe he's not even first; he becomes second or third.
Yeah.
And the wheel idea is actually, it's not that Jesus is the first among many other things. He is the center of everything.
There we go.
And he's got to be the center part of every part of our life.
Yeah.
And everything really stems from him. And I love that that's really been the Navigators' focus for all of these years. Yeah. And then the second thing you just said there, we're seeing that in disciple-making movements all over the world, Vicki, is that when the Bible is the main curriculum, the main thing that you're focused on, the Word of God is the main thing we're trying to get into people's hearts, and the main thing we're trying to live out in action, that really changes everything, right? And so, and that's what I love about every navigator I've met, is that they constantly are lifting up Jesus, not just as a first among equals, but literally the center of it all, and the Bible being the foundation we're building upon. Yeah. I think we've lost that many times, especially in the West, that we get so focused on other things, or we try to be clever and creative, and we lose that the Bible really does need to be the main teaching point and foundation of our lives. And so on behalf of people everywhere, Vicki, thank you guys at the Navigators for making that so clear, seriously, because it's so needed, because I think so often we lose sight of building everything upon the Word of God and making Jesus the center of it all. Yeah. And simplifying it like that, Vicki, is so important. And so thank you guys.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And honestly, that's the experience I've had since working for the organization. I actually was a physical therapist for 30 years. So I was what we call an everyday disciple maker, out there doing my job and looking for conversations about Christ along the way, every day. But since I've been working for the organization, I regularly have people, like, they'll make a beeline across the room. They see my shirt. They see the sign behind me. Are you really with the Navigators? The Navigators changed my life. And I mean, there are many other wonderful disciple-making organizations. So it's not all about us. But I always say, what I really hear is that someone discipled you and that changed your life. And I really believe that's what it's all about. And the one thing I didn't mention on our wheel is the rim, the outer rim. It's called the Obedient Christian in Action. And that's about, when we're walking with somebody and they're walking with us, we get to see that firsthand, how they live out the scriptures that you're learning together. That's obedience. That's walking with God. And what a beautiful journey.
Well, and how important is that, Vicki? Because, for whatever reason, throughout the West, especially over the last couple hundred years, we've really shifted to assuming, falsely actually, but assuming that if we get the right knowledge in our head, it's going to change everything. Yes. And a knowledge-based discipleship has actually not led us in the direction we need to go. Even though knowledge is important, it's great to have the right knowledge. Yep. But without that outer rim that you're talking about, without obedience playing itself out and us actually putting it into practice, we're not getting the disciples that we hope for, right? Yeah. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because that part is so important. And we're seeing that as well in disciple-making movements globally right now, that they're shifting from a knowledge-based approach to an obedience-based approach. And Vicki, why do you think that obedience has gotten to be such a dirty word now in the West? Like, why do you why do you think that so many times when people hear that word, they kind of push against it? Why do you think that is?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Number one, of course, is just our sin nature. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. But I think, too, there's a greater awareness these days of where abuses take place. We're more willing to talk about it. But then we're almost sometimes hyper aware. Oh, is that what God wants from me? And where things have gone wrong with that idea of obedience, it colors or taints our picture. But honestly, obedience to God is simply, it's an attachment to Him. It's walking with Him. It's wanting to be with Him. And because of that relationship that you're building with God, the obedience is just the overflow from that relationship that you already have. And I totally agree with you. I think that we have spent a lot of time, and especially in this day and age, we want to defend proper doctrine because There are so many ways in which we've gone astray, right? I mean, even
Yeah.
some crazy things. And so we want to stand on proper doctrine, but sometimes we make that the only thing. But
Right.
the proper doctrine points us to the Lord, and it helps us understand him, and it helps us develop a relationship with him. And that's where it's all at,
Yeah, and I think where we've gotten wrong, I think you hit it right on the head. Where we've gotten it wrong is where if I'm leading a group of people and all of a sudden it's no longer about obedience to God or Jesus as king, but it's obedience to me as the leader. Like, you need to listen to me.
Yeah.
That's where it gets to be abusive. That's where it gets to be very unhealthy.
Yeah.
But when we're disciples who are all on the same level together and we're trying to obey King Jesus and whatever he says, and we're helping one another do that, that's where it's a beautiful thing, where we're working out our faith together as a family on mission together. That's beautiful. But obedience to me as the leader, like, that's where things get very unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so I love that you brought that up, because it really is obedience to God. It's obedience to King Jesus, whatever he says. We call it sometimes, Vicki, the Mary principle. When the wedding at Cana happened, Mary, brings the staff around and she points to Jesus and says, "Hey, whatever he says, do that." Like, that's what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think when we have that attitude, Vicki, that's where things are in a really healthy, appropriate place.
Yes.
That, hey, whatever Jesus says, that's what we're going to do. Whatever he's calling us into, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's not about a leader. It's not about you. It's really about us together, making Jesus truly King and Lord of our lives, and saying, hey, whatever he says, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to help one another do that.
Yeah.
And I found that to be true, Vicki. And like I've mentioned multiple times, in navigators that I've met across the world, my mentor being one of them, just lifting up that idea that, hey, we're going to be obedient disciples, obedient Christians to God, and we're going to help one another do that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Vicki. How does it? So you obviously, part of your role is working with churches to help them do this practically within the local church context.
That's right.
What are if there's some leaders out there listening right now that would love to help their people become better disciples, stronger foundation, what are some things that you offer to local churches in order to kind of help them make better disciples and be better disciples? What does that process look like?
Yeah, we like to say that our mission is to partner with church leaders to help them build disciple-making cultures that transform communities. So when we talk about, this is our mission, that's what we're doing. So the way that we partner is we first develop a relationship with the pastor, the church leaders, because we want to know them. We want them to know who we are. And I think something that is maybe unique, not completely unique to Navigators Church Ministries, but in the world of what's out there, I think we're kind of unique in the fact that we walk with the church through the process. We have curriculum, but we're not all about curriculum. We're more about the process and the relationship. So we get to know the church leaders. We talk about building culture. There's tons of sayings out there about culture, but culture eats strategy for lunch. That's one of them we hear a lot, right?
And breakfast and dinner.
So whatever it is, we're built, like it's up to us to intentionally build a culture around disciple making. If we're not building the culture is going to influence us. So we will go in and help them build a core team of people who are disciple makers, who want to see this like built out into the church. Our goal, our vision is to see every church sending everyday disciple makers to transform their everywhere. That's some of the language you'll hear from us. So as we work with churches, we're helping them start with a core team who's going to champion that, who's going to help build culture, who's going to talk about, this is our common language. These are our common values. These are our practices. And we walk alongside the church and also the church leaders, generations of disciple makers to help them all kind of build that culture together.
That's beautiful, Vicki. And I'm so glad you brought that up. It's actually a fairly new direction that we're going at Discipleship.org is one of the fresh kind of visions that God's put on our heart is to see 16% of churches across America shift to a true disciple-making culture.
Nice.
And the reason why we got some pushback last time we said this because we didn't explain it very well. And 16%, the only reason we throw out that number is because Malcolm Gladwell says that is tipping point. So if you can get to 16%, the 16% influences the rest of culture.
Yes.
And so that's the first step. Our goal, of course, is 100% of churches to have a disciple-making culture. But right now, the most recent studies, Vicki, show that less than 5% of churches have a true disciple-making culture.
Yeah.
Aspirationally, they all want to, but functionally, their actual culture is not leading to true disciple-making. And so that's why we love being partners with you guys, is because the vision that God's put on our heart is how can we shift as many churches as possible to a true disciple-making culture. And I know that's your guys' heart. I know that's your vision. Because like you said, curriculum is one thing, but shifting the culture from the inside out, that makes such a different, powerful impact than just, having a book or a video series or whatever that somebody goes through. But if we can inject true disciple making into the fabric of the church and leadership, then that changes everything. Which I love that you guys are focused on that. Tell me, and this is pretty general. If you have a specific one, that's fine. I'd love to hear a specific example, but if not, that's okay. But walk with me through what changes happen when a church that does not really have a great disciple-making culture begins to shift in this direction. What changes? What impact does it make when you guys come in and actually begin to reshape the culture of a local church?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. We definitely start with purposeful leaders. And to your point of only 5% of American churches being true disciple-making churches, I feel that will increase in the next number of years because at least in my setting, I have people coming to me and finding me and saying, this is what we want to do. We just haven't known how to do it.
Right.
Well, that's beautiful. So we're starting with purposeful leaders who say, this is what we want. So they're committed to it. And we ask them, are you willing to tithe like 10% of your work week toward getting this done? Because honestly, churches have so many programs that it's hard to build something new when everybody's exhausted and their calendar is full. So we start by asking them, are you willing to put some things aside? The other thing is, like, even for the leadership of the church, the lead pastor, is he making disciples? When they are intent on it, they talk about it from the pulpit. They champion it themselves, and then we build a team around them that are championing it. That really is, that becomes the tipping point, because everybody in the church is influencing someone. And what we see later is people coming and asking for it. Like, there's a local church here. I live just outside of Fort Wayne, I'm a Buckeye. I live just across the state line in Indiana. And so here in Hicksville, Ohio, there's a church that's on their third generation of making disciples. And people are coming up to the pastors and saying, I want to be discipled. Can you set me up with someone to disciple me? Because they're hearing the stories, and the church is telling the stories about the people, how they were hesitant at first. They didn't know what that was all about, but someone invested in them. And at some point that light bulb goes out. Like, wow, this is different from any other approach that I've taken to study the scriptures. And I've got a good friend beside me, or a couple of good friends beside me, who are on a journey with me. And they begin to tell those stories, and people hear it and they're like, wait a minute, I want that too. And you begin to see the very heart of the church beat for that mission, because people are desiring it.
That's so good. I honestly, I think that's such a good challenge for us, Vicki, is that what you said is, what I heard you say is it really does, as leaders, it's got to start with us. Like if we're not leading from the front and modeling for people what this looks like, then it's going to be really hard for our people to catch what's really happening.
Yeah.
And not only leading from the front, but celebrating that, talking about it, casting vision around it. What most of the time, and somebody said this, it's not original to me, but I don't remember who it was, so I'll say I said it, but it's even though it wasn't me. What we celebrate gets repeated. That's right. What we talk about most frequently is what people aspire to. Yeah. And if we're going to be, doing what you said, and as leaders, championing it from the front, leading from the front, telling stories about it, then we're going to have people that long to experience that and long to be a part of that. Yep. And that's so important. Yep. And so often, I mean, how crazy is it that as leaders, and I know I've found myself there so many times, that I get so busy with different things that I forget about the core mission that Jesus has called me to. I mean, he didn't, even though all these things are good, he didn't call me to start programs or even to start churches, even though churches are great. His command to me was to go make disciples of all nations. Like that was the command. Yeah. Now churches can absolutely do that in an incredible way. And we see that was the outworking of that command is that church is formed. But at the end of the day, if we're so busy that we can't focus on really the core command that Jesus has given us, then there's something wrong with our schedule, right? And so thank you for giving us that challenge, Vicki. I think it's so important for all of us leaders to really remember, hey, we're on a mission here, and Jesus has given us a very clear direction on what he wants us to focus our time and energy on. And I love the challenge you just gave. Like, hey, are you willing to give 10% of your time to this? Like, are you willing to set aside intentional time to build this system, to help change culture, to live it out from the front? What a great challenge. And so for those out there listening right now, guys, hear me clearly. I know that so often we, all of us have great intentions. We long to see this happen. We want to make disciples. Sometimes we don't know how, but what Vicki's really saying here, guys, is do you have that desire, and are you willing to set aside the time and energy it takes to really get this thing off the ground? And if that answer is yes, man, reach out to the Navigators, reach out to us at Discipleship.org. We would love to help you and to really see the culture of your church shifted to a true disciple-making culture. Vicki, if people want to reach out to you in order to really take the next steps, how do they get in touch? What does that look like for you guys?
The best place is to go to our website. It's Navigators, plural, Navigators Church Ministries, also plural.org. You can get on our website. We've got free resources there that can at least help you get thinking, in the right direction in terms of, these are some of the tools we use. But there's a contact us button on there that you can press. We have somebody monitoring that all the time. And you can reach out to us for a conversation. We want information about how to get started with our church, or tell me a staff person you have in your area. We have over 100 practitioners with NCM, Nav Church Ministries, all over the country. And we have people on other shores as well, overseas. But just asking, like, who's in my area, we can set you up to talk with somebody and kind of find out what's going on in your area. We work a lot over Zoom because we can't be everywhere at once. But we do have a great staff, just people who are in love with this mission, want to see it move forward. And so I would say the first stop would be our website.
Okay.
You could also, you could email NCM at navigatorschurchministries.org, and that would be a way to just reach out via email to us as well.
Awesome. So navigatorschurchministries.org. You guys heard it. If you guys are, if you guys are ready to really begin to shift culture in your church and what Vicki was saying hit your heart, definitely reach out to them, guys. I know that they would love to, like she just said, they would love to help you. They'd love to serve you. And so definitely reach out to them. They've got, like she said, a bunch of free resources and a lot of ways that they can help you. So reach out to them. We also have a lot of free ebooks and different resources and articles about these topics that we were talking about on Discipleship.org. And so come over to us as well. We'd love to help serve you guys, but reach out. And we would love to help shift culture within your churches to really see disciples who make disciples who make disciples.
Yeah.
Vicki, thank you for being on. It was an honor to have you.
Absolutely.
And this was a great discussion. It was truly an honor and a privilege, really. And so thank you so much.
Well, thank you for what all of you do in gathering like-minded people together to talk about this. There really is strength in numbers. And I see that as we look at others who are making disciples, who make disciples, who make disciples, and have a love for the local church, it only strengthens all of us. So we appreciate what all of you do as well.
No, thank you, Vicki, so much. Well, guys, we're going to wrap up today. Thank you for listening, and please check out their website and reach out if there's any way that the Navigators or us at Discipleship.org can help you guys. Again, we want to serve you and help you to really see disciple-making multiplication happen within your church and community, and we would love to help in any way possible. And so thanks, guys, for listening. We'll catch you next time, and thanks again, Vicki, for being on.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. See you guys.